If somebody competed in the Olympics and they showed up and they, walked up to the judges and they just expected to be given a perfect 10 and they expected to be given a gold medal, we would ridicule that person. Society would mock them as delusional. But this is practically the same mentality that Christians have about heaven, about the crown of glory to come. We have this attitude that without running the race, without really contending for righteousness and holiness and to be sanctified and changed, that God is just going to give us the crown. God is just going to give us heaven and all these good things, while denying that we are supposed to be contending for these things, and in contending for those things, we obtain them. And this is what the mentality, the doctrine of today is so prevalent in saying, is that without holiness, you can enter heaven. Without contending and wrestling and doing the labor of righteousness, of wrestling to, put off your sin and put on holiness, that the crown is ours. That the moment you're saved, you're just given heaven and you don't have to do anything in between. And so many people are wasting their lives and endangering their lives, their souls, because they don't even know what this life is for. They don't understand that the gospel is this abundant mercy, this abundant grace given to all of us, but it's met with a covenant. It's met with conditions. And what God has given us in Christ is the ability now to put off sin and to put on righteousness. And this is the hope. This is the hope and the work that we are doing. This is what we are contending for. But in taking the gospel basically in half, taking only the abundant grace of God, the freeness of the gospel, and severing it from the expectation that we have to use this gospel for good and for righteousness, severing the gospel in half has blinded so many people from really understanding all of these scriptures that we have about fighting to win, racing to win, and putting off the sin and putting off all these wicked ways and putting on righteousness and preparing for the kingdom to come. And I think a lot of people really fear this expectation, and this is why they deny that this expectation is real. But what God shows us, is work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you both to will and work for his good pleasure. This is the duality here, that God does have this expectation, and it's a good and fair expectation, but he's not leaving us on our own to do this on our own. He's met us with perfect grace through Christ to enable us to do these things, to fully work these things through us. But we have to be participating in this. We have to be giving every effort, as Peter talks about. We have to see that this is the expectation and the duty of the Christian, or we can just spend our lives thinking that everything is golden and great without really fighting to win. What we see in Israel and God judging Israel is a people who believed that they were to inherit blessing from God without living righteously. You can see this in Matthew 3, you can see this in Romans 11. The people of Israel presumed that God owed them this salvation. He owed them this blessing and acceptance when they were not walking in righteousness. And this is exactly the same spiritual issue that the church falls into regularly, and not believing that to be blessed by God, to be the righteous of God, means we actually have to live righteously, and we have to be fighting and contending for those things. And the great warning of Israel and what happened to Israel is that we too can be cut off. We too can be condemned if we don't walk in that righteousness. This is what Romans 11:22 says. Note then the kindness and the severity of God. Severity towards those who have fallen, but God's kindness to you, provided you continue in his kindness. Otherwise you too will be cut off. It says in the previous verse, for if God did not spare the natural branches, neither will he spare you. But how much of the theology and the mindset of grace and the gospel today denies that God will judge us by how we live, denies that we too have to live righteously or we too will be judged. I believe that one of the reasons the gospel is so weak today is because we've removed the very core of it. Righteousness, the core of a real expectation for righteousness, not this bullying of making people feel that they need to be righteous on their own strength and somehow, they don't have time to learn the things of God, but they're expected to have perfect theology and all that goes on, but a real expectation that we are contending for a righteousness as we are holding on to God's grace and removing the righteous expectation of God, the judgment of God against all people, including Christians, makes our witness in the world very weak.